Mid to have everything, envied something Jake still carried in his heart, the ability to give love without condition. Richard straightened his shoulders. I want to help you, Jake, not as charity but as gratitude and as recognition of the kind of man you are. Jake frowned, uncertain. Help me? I don't— Yes, Richard interrupted gently. I run several businesses. I can offer you steady work. A salary that will allow you to rebuild your life. You deserve that chance. The offer left Jake stunned. For years he had been scraping by, drowning under bills weighed down by court fees in his custody battle. The thought of stability felt almost unreal, like a dream he wasn't sure he was allowed to have. But why me? Jake whispered. Richard's answer was simple. Because last night you gave when you had nothing to spare. You reminded me of the value of being a father. That deserves more than just thanks. The twins looked up, their eyes bright. Daddy, can we see him again? One asked softly. He made us feel like family. Richard's gaze softened even further and he nodded slowly. Yes, I think you should. In the weeks that followed, Richard stayed true to his word. Jake was given a stable job that paid more than enough to cover his debts and rebuild his dignity. Slowly, he began to piece his life back together. He fought for more time with his children, and this time, he had the resources to stand firm. The day came when his kids returned to his home, their laughter once again filling the space that had felt empty for so long. Jake cooked dinner for them just as he had for the twins, and as he watched their smiles, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Richard, too, kept in touch. Sometimes his daughters would ask to visit, and Jake welcomed them gladly. Over time, the bond that began on that stormy night grew into something lasting. Two families, once strangers, became connected through an act of kindness. Looking back, Jake realized how close he had come to giving up, how the weight of loneliness and failure had nearly crushed him. But that single knock at his door had changed everything. He often told his children, a small act of kindness can open the biggest doors. And he meant it. Because he had lived it, Jake's story wasn't about wealth or power or luck. It was about the choice to care even when life felt empty. And that choice had not only saved two little girls, it had saved him too. And so from one stormy night came a story that no one could have imagined. A struggling single father who thought he had nothing left. Two little girls who only wanted to feel safe. And a wealthy man who realized that all his riches could never replace love. Their meeting wasn't just coincidence. It was a reminder that sometimes life brings the right people together at exactly the right time. For Jake, that night changed everything. He opened his door expecting nothing, and yet he found something more valuable than gold. By choosing kindness in the middle of his own struggles, he discovered hope again. He found a second chance to rebuild his life, to reconnect with his children and to feel like a father once more. What he gave freely came back to him in ways he never could have dreamed of. For Richard, the night revealed a truth he had long ignored. He had power, success, and wealth, but none of it could replace the warmth of being there for his daughters. Watching a man with so little give so much forced him to reflect on his own life, and in that reflection he saw clearly. What his children needed wasn't more money, it was more of him. And for the twins, that night proved something beautiful. They saw kindness in a stranger. They felt what a father's care should feel like, even if just for a short time, and their innocent words carried the power to change two men forever. But what about you? Yes, you, the one listening right now. What do you believe? Do you think that kindness always finds its way back? Can one choice, one small gesture truly change everything? I want you to pause and reflect. Maybe you've been Jake before, giving when you had little, or maybe you've been Richard, realizing too late that the people you love need more of your time than your money. Perhaps you've even been like those girls, longing for someone to care. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experiences in the comments, because your story might inspire someone else to choose kindness today. And if you felt even a spark of hope from this video, don't forget to like it. A simple click may not seem like much, but it helps us bring more real, emotional stories to you and to people around the world who need encouragement. And of course, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could brighten your day or change the way you see the world. We're building a community here, a place where kindness, love, and hope are shared like a ripple that keeps spreading. Until next time, hold on to this truth. No act of kindness is ever wasted. Even the smallest gesture, the smallest moment, can become the miracle that changes someone's entire life. How to make pancakes? The other chimed in eagerly. Do you have a dog? Or maybe a cat? Jake chuckled, shaking his head. No pets. Not yet, at least. Every word, every giggle, every curious glance reminded him of what it was like to have children around. For a brief moment, it almost felt like his own kids had returned to him, that the emptiness of the house had been replaced with love once again. When the meal was done, Jake offered them the old couch in the living room to rest on. He tucked a thin blanket around their shoulders, the same way he used to tuck in his son and daughter years ago. As he pulled the blanket up, one of the girls whispered, "Thank you." It was just two simple words, but they carried weight. Gratitude, sincerity, and a trust that children rarely gave so quickly to strangers. Jake nodded, his throat tight with emotion. He sat nearby as they began to drift off, their breathing soft and even. Watching them sleep stirred something deep in him. Their small frames, curled together for comfort, looked fragile, almost as if the world had been too heavy for them. He wondered what they had gone through, what story had led them to his doorstep. And yet, despite the mystery that surrounded them, Jake felt a strange peace settle over him. For the first time in years, his house didn't feel like just four walls holding emptiness. It felt alive, filled with laughter, questions, and the innocence of two children who, in their own way, had brought warmth back into his life. Jake leaned back, closing his tired eyes. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but in that moment, surrounded by the sound of soft breathing and lingering echoes of laughter, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, life was giving him a chance to feel like a father again. The storm outside had calmed into a soft drizzle, the rhythmic drops pattering against the cracked windows of Jake's small house. Inside, the faint glow of the lamp cast a warm light over the twins curled up on his couch. Their faces were innocent, but their wide, sleepless eyes carried a weight beyond their years. For a long time, none of them spoke. Then, in a quiet voice, one of the girls broke the silence. "Do you have kids?" The question hit Jake like a blow. He hesitated, his chest tightening. Memories flashed before him. Tiny hands gripping his, laughter filling the air, bedtime stories whispered in the dark. He cleared his throat and answered softly, "Yes, I do." The other twin tilted her head, curiosity written all over her face. "Where are they?" Jake looked away, his voice heavy. "They live with their mother now." "I don't get to see them as often as I'd like." A hush fell over the room. The girls exchanged a glance, their expressions shifting to something Jake recognized instantly. Sadness laced with longing. One of them lowered her eyes and whispered, "Our dad is always busy. He's always away. Sometimes it feels like we don't even have one." Jake's heart twisted. Their words weren't just confessions, they were mirrors reflecting his own children's pain. He thought about the countless nights his kids must have asked about him, waiting, wondering why he wasn't there. The guilt gnawed at him. "I'm sure your father loves you," Jake said softly, though he wasn't sure if he believed it himself. "Maybe," one of the girls replied, her voice barely audible. "But love doesn't mean much when someone isn't there to show it." The honesty in her words cut deep. Jake felt exposed, as though she had pulled the curtain on his own failures. He remembered birthdays he had missed, phone calls he hadn't answered because he was working late, moments stolen by circumstances he couldn't control. He leaned forward, his voice low but filled with sincerity. "Sometimes the people who love us are fighting battles we can't see. It doesn't mean they don't care. It just means life can be unfair, and it pulls them away." The twins looked at him, their young faces unusually thoughtful. Slowly, one of them reached out, her small hand brushing against his. "You're kind," she whispered. "You feel like what a dad should be." Jake's throat tightened, his eyes stinging. He had spent years feeling stripped of the very role that defined him. But here, sitting with two little strangers, he felt it again. Fatherhood wasn't only about blood. It was about being present, listening, caring. And tonight, despite his brokenness, he had given them what they needed most: comfort. The girls finally began to drift off, their breathing steady and calm. Jake sat beside them, watching over them protectively, his mind spinning with thoughts of his own children. For the first time in years, the silence of his home didn't feel like emptiness. Instead, it carried a strange new warmth as he leaned back, exhaustion tugging at his body. One thought echoed in his heart. Perhaps life was giving him a second chance to be the father he had always wanted to be. The morning light crept through the thin curtains, casting pale stripes across the room. The storm had passed, leaving behind a calm silence broken only by the steady breathing of the twins curled up beneath the blanket Jake had given them. For a moment everything felt strangely peaceful, almost unreal. Jake stood in the cramped kitchen heating water for a cup of instant coffee. The faint aroma drifted through the house, mingling with the lingering scent of rain and damp clothes. Yet his thoughts were heavy, circling back to the girls. Who were they? Why had they shown up at his door? And why did their words still echo in his chest as though they belonged to his own children? Then the sudden crunch of tires on gravel snapped him from his thoughts. Jake stiffened, turning toward the window. A sleek black luxury car pulled up in front of his small weathered house, its polished body gleaming against the pale morning sun. His heart began to pound. The twins stirred, blinking awake. Their eyes widened instantly as they spotted the vehicle. They looked at each other, their expressions filled with recognition, and something else too, perhaps relief mixed with unease. A tall man emerged from the car. His tailored suit, immaculate shoes, and commanding presence left no doubt. This was someone accustomed to power. His eyes, sharp and assessing, swept over the humble home before landing on Jake. "Daddy," the twins cried, their voices breaking the silence as they bolted toward the door. Jake froze. "Daddy?" His breath caught, and the truth struck him like lightning. These two fragile girls who had appeared out of nowhere, who had clung to him for comfort through the storm, were the daughters of this man. The stranger's stern expression softened as the twins flung themselves into his arms. He knelt, holding them close, his face momentarily unguarded with relief. But when he lifted his gaze to Jake, curiosity flickered there, mingled with something harder to read. "Are you the man who sheltered my daughters last night?" the man asked, his tone calm yet weighted with authority. Jake shifted uneasily, suddenly aware of every crack in the walls around him, every mark of his modest life. But he steadied his voice. "They knocked on my door during the storm. I couldn't leave them outside. Any father would have done the same." The man studied him carefully. His sharp gaze softened, noticing the weariness in Jake's features, the humility in his words. The twins clung to their father's arms but tugged at his sleeve, their eyes shining. "He was kind, Daddy," one whispered. "He took care of us. He made us feel safe." The words struck the man deeply. His composure faltered, his jaw tightening as he turned back toward Jake. In that silent exchange, there was an unspoken recognition, the understanding of fathers, bound not by wealth but by love and sacrifice. Jake stood rooted, humbled and uncertain, unaware that this encounter was more than chance. It was the beginning of something that would change his life forever. The air hung heavy with silence as the twins held tightly to their father. Jake remained on the porch, uncertain of what to do next, feeling like an outsider who had stumbled into a story that didn't belong to him. His modest home, the peeling paint and the worn shoes by the door seemed to stand in sharp contrast to the gleaming car and the man who now stood before him. Yet, instead of coldness, there was gratitude in the millionaire's eyes. He gently released his daughters and stepped forward, extending his hand. Jake hesitated, then shook it, surprised by the warmth in the man's grip. "My name is Richard," the stranger said quietly. "I owe you more than I can ever repay. My daughters are everything to me. Last night they could have been lost, hurt, or worse. But because of you, they were safe." Jake tried to brush off the compliment. "I only did what anyone would do," he murmured. But Richard shook his head firmly. "No," he said, "not everyone would. You took them in without question, even when you had little yourself. That speaks volumes." The twins clung to their father's sides, but their eyes lingered on Jake with a tenderness that made his chest ache. In their short time together, he had filled a space in their hearts, just as they had unknowingly filled a void in his. Richard studied the inside of Jake's house, his sharp eyes noting the modest furniture, the patched-up walls, the evidence of a man struggling alone. He turned back, his voice softening. "Tell me, Jake, do you have children of your own?" Jake's throat tightened. "Yes, two, but they live with their mother now. I don't see them as much as I wish I could." The silence stretched between them, heavy with meaning. Richard's expression shifted, his face marked by understanding. He glanced down at his daughters, then back at Jake. "You gave my girls what I sometimes fail to give them," Richard admitted. "Presence, warmth, safety. Perhaps money can buy many things, but not that. For Jake, the words landed like a revelation. This man who Imagine this for a moment. You're a single parent. The house is quiet, but not in a comforting way. The kind of quiet that feels heavy, like it's pressing down on you. The bills on the kitchen table keep piling up. Your fridge is almost empty, and every day feels like an uphill climb. You love your kids more than anything, but the loneliness, the exhaustion, it never leaves you. Now picture this. On a stormy night, when the rain is hammering against your roof and the wind sounds like it could tear the whole place apart, you suddenly hear a knock at the door. It's late, far too late for visitors. Your heart skips. Who could it possibly be at this hour? That night, Jake, a struggling single father, opened his door to find something he could never have imagined. Two little girls, shivering from the cold with eyes so innocent yet filled with something deeper, something unspoken. He didn't know them. They weren't from the neighborhood. But there they were, standing alone in the dark, drenched from the storm. Jake froze. Should he let them in? Could he even take care of them when he barely had enough for himself? His heart wrestled with his mind. And then, in one simple moment of compassion, he made a choice. What Jake didn't know that night was that his life was about to change forever, because those two little girls carried with them a secret that would shake his world to its core. The storm outside raged on, louder and more violent with every passing minute. The windows shook against the wind, and the old roof groaned as if it might give in. Jake shut the door quickly, his heart still racing from the unexpected knock. Standing in his living room now were two little girls, twins no older than 8 or 9. Their tiny shoes left muddy trails across the worn floorboards, their damp clothes clinging to their shivering frames. Jake rushed to find an old towel, wrapping it gently around their shoulders. "Where are your parents? Do they know you're out here?" His tone was calm, but inside unease gnawed at him. The girls looked at each other, their identical faces mirroring the same nervous expression. One of them lowered her gaze to the floor and whispered, almost too softly to hear, "We were lost. Lost." The word echoed in Jake's mind. At this hour, in the middle of a storm? Something about it didn't feel right. He studied them closely, the way their wide eyes darted around the room, the way they clung to each other as if the world outside was too dangerous to face. They were frightened, but behind that fear was something more, something hidden. Jake's thoughts tumbled. He could barely feed himself. His cupboards were nearly empty, his bills stacked high. Taking in 2 strangers, even for one night, was more than he could handle. But then another thought cut through his worries, the silence of his home, the absence of his children's voices since the divorce. The laughter that once filled these walls had been replaced with loneliness. He sighed deeply, lowering himself to their level. "All right," he said, voice gentle but firm. "You can stay here tonight. You're safe now." The twins glanced at each other again, and this time there was something different in their eyes. Relief, yes, but also mystery, as if they shared a secret too big for words. Jake brought them warm water in chipped mugs. As they held the cups in their tiny hands, he couldn't shake the uneasiness in his chest. Who were these girls? Why were they alone on a night like this? And why did it feel as though fate itself had guided them to his doorstep? He didn't know it yet. But this single act of compassion would unravel a story far greater than he could ever imagine. Jake sat quietly in the corner of his living room, the twins wrapped in towels and sipping from chipped mugs of warm water. Their fragile voices and small presence filled the empty house in a way he hadn't experienced in years. And as he looked at them, his mind began to drift back to his own story, a story carved from heartbreak, struggle, and endless sacrifice. There was a time when Jake had everything that truly mattered. He wasn't rich, not even close, but he had love, family, and purpose. A wife who once smiled at him with affection, 2 beautiful children who brought laughter into his world, and dreams of building a life where they'd never have to feel the struggles he had grown up with. For Jake, family was everything. He worked long shifts, often stretching himself thin, but he never complained. because every dollar he earned meant food on the table, shoes on his children's feet, and a chance at the life he wanted for them. But as the years passed, the weight of financial struggles began pressing down harder and harder. Layoffs at work, medical bills, debts that piled up like bricks. It all chipped away at the fragile balance of their lives. Arguments became routine. His wife grew weary of the constant stress, of the nights when Jake came home too tired to talk, too drained to smile. She wanted more stability, more comfort, more of a future than Jake could provide. The breaking point came when she left, taking with her not just her belongings but also their children. The day in court still haunted him. He remembered the way his daughter clung to his arm, crying, "Daddy, I don't want to go." He remembered the empty look on his son's face as he tried to be brave, but couldn't hide the fear in his eyes. And he remembered the cold words of the judge telling him that in his current financial state, custody wasn't possible. That moment broke him in a way nothing else ever had. Since then, life had been little more than survival. He moved into this small, weather-beaten house on the edge of town, barely managing to keep the roof from caving in. His fridge was often empty, his bills stacked so high they felt like mountains. The heating worked only sometimes, and the walls echoed with silence. But the silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating. Every corner of the house carried ghosts of the life he once had, of bedtime stories whispered under dim lamps, of laughter that filled mornings like sunlight. The loneliness gnawed at him most of all. Jake was a man built for family. Coming home to an empty house each night felt like a punishment he didn't deserve. He'd often sit on the sagging couch, staring at the faded family photo still hanging crookedly on the wall. In it, his kids were smiling, their arms wrapped around him, the picture of happiness. Sometimes he'd trace the edges of their faces with his finger, whispering apologies they would never hear. Nights like those ended with him in tears, his chest aching with the weight of regret. Financially, he was constantly on the edge of collapse. His steady job had disappeared when the factory downsized, and since then, he took whatever scraps of work he could find. Construction shifts that left his hands raw and blistered, handyman jobs that paid barely enough to buy groceries. Some weeks he didn't know if he could keep the lights on. More than once he had skipped meals, choosing instead to save what little food he had for the slim hope that his children might visit one day. Yet through all of it, Jake carried something that refused to die inside him. A flicker of hope. Hope that life might give him another chance. Hope that he might one day hold his children again. Hope that kindness still mattered in a world that often felt cruel. Now, as he looked at the twins sitting in his home, he felt that flicker grow a little brighter. Their innocence reminded him of his own children. Their quiet presence brought life back into a space that had been empty for far too long. For the first time in years, his home didn't feel entirely hollow. And yet, even as warmth stirred inside him, fear whispered in his mind. Who were these girls? Why had they shown up on his doorstep? And why did it feel as though destiny itself had sent them here, on this stormy night, to challenge the fragile walls he had built around his broken heart? Jake didn't know the answers, but one thing was certain. Something was about to change. The storm outside had begun to ease, the heavy rain softening into a steady drizzle. Inside Jake's small, worn-down home, the air was warmer now, filled with the soft crackle of the old space heater in the corner. The twins sat cross-legged at the rickety kitchen table, their hair still damp but their cheeks glowing from the warmth. For the first time that night, Jake saw the faintest hint of smiles on their faces. He searched his cupboards for something, anything, he could offer them to eat. There wasn't much. A half-empty box of pasta, a dented can of soup, and the last 2 slices of bread that were starting to go stale. It wasn't much of a meal, but it was all he had. He heated the soup on the stove, stirred it carefully, and split the bread between the girls. As they ate, something unexpected began to happen. The tension in the room slowly melted away, replaced by the kind of small, innocent chatter only children could bring. One of the girls looked up at him with wide, curious eyes. "Do you live here all by yourself?" she asked between sips of soup. Jake hesitated, the question pressing against the softest part of his heart. Yes, he answered quietly. Just me. The other twin tilted her head, her voice bright with genuine curiosity. Don't you get lonely? Jake forced a small smile, though the truth weighed heavy in his chest. Sometimes, he admitted, but nights like this feel a little less lonely. The girls exchanged a quick glance, then giggled. The sound of their laughter filled the kitchen like sunlight breaking through clouds. It was light, pure, and unguarded, something Jake hadn't heard within these walls for so long. His heart tightened, not with pain, but with a bittersweet longing. They began to pepper him with questions, childlike, innocent, and sometimes completely unexpected. Why is your table so wobbly? One asked, tapping the uneven leg. Do you know,